All right, I will say good morning, a good tevach. Hopefully everyone had a beautiful and uplifting and meaningful restorative Shabbos. A great zichus Baruch Hashem to begin a new week of learning together. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. So thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Adar Aleph. This is Selma Wolf for dedicating all the Shumer Drashos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of a refuah shlema for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers, and the merit of Hashem in the schus of the return of each of our hostages. The Schwartzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef Ben Meir. The Ziv, Levine, and Berman families, in memory of Mr. William Ziv, Zev Shmuel Ben Yisrael, Zichron Levrach. We hope that of the merit, and of course, we dedicate all of Maseches Bava Kamma Le'ilui Nishmas Master Sergeant Yomi Charush Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamas will have an Aliyah and the families a Nechama. And of course, we thank Said and Simahakin for sponsoring this pastries this morning in memory of Said's mother Tajiba Atari, whose Shloshim is on this coming Wednesday. We hope that in the merit of the brachas and in the merit of the beautiful Chavrashaft that only pastries could engender, that in merit Hashem the Neshama should have an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. Well, see, with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful daf ahead of us today, and the good news is, I think, at least for a little bit, in Meretz Hashem, we have some normal-sized dafim ahead of us today. Not that means I'm going to make it all the way through, but at least there's a greater statistical probability. So I will say, so today's daf is Kuf Aleph 101, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem at the 2 dots on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph 101a. So I will say, so it happens to be just in a lot of these cases. I was thinking that I'm not sure, maybe we have like a good Shavuos night ahead of us where we could literally just take topics in Bava Kamma and just go through all of them, because there's so many fascinating cases. And the truth is, because in a lot of times also you learn in Gemara, so you could kind of just see you could pluck out the halacha lemaisa from the page. You know, there's machlokas, we pass like this, we don't pass like this. As you can begin to see, a lot of these cases are much more nuanced. So in other words, we can emerge with certain principles, but how we actually apply the principles is not going to be as straightforward necessarily just as a straight up machloksim on page of the Gemara. So I don't know. All right, we'll have to find an opportunity in Meretz Hashem to go through them. So let's go. Tana Rabbanan. Interesting case here. Hanosin eitzim l'chara shlasas mem kisei vasimem Safsal ve'asam en kisei. Well, so here's the case. I go to Reuven. Reuven is a carpenter. I go ahead and I give him wood. I say, Reuven, here's the deal. I'm giving you wood. I want a chair. Make me a chair. He makes me a bench. Or I give him what I say, make me a bench, he makes me a chair. So what's the shaila? So we'll say, so now obviously, he owes me money. The shaila is, how much does he owe me? Now we'll say, now remember again, what is this very much rooted in? Well, let's see. Rabbi Meir says, no sin lo demei eitzav. Rabbi Meir says that Reuven is obligated to pay me the value of the wood. The value of the wood. Now, what's interesting about this case over here? What's interesting in this case is I gave Reuven wood. What did Reuven give me back? What did he give me back? So he gave me a finished product. Now, granted, it's not the finished product that I want. Now, what's interesting to note, I will say, is bipashtos, we would all assume that what? That a finished product is always going to be more valuable than the wood. So here's what's interesting. So right here, he disobeyed my order, right? I wanted a chair. He made me a bench. So there is a bench, right? The bench is a davar shabali olam. It exists. And it's sitting right here in Reuven's workshop. Rabbi Meir says, Reuven doesn't have to give me the bench. What does he have to give me? The value of the wood. Now, what is this based on? So remember, Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that uman kona b'shevach kli. We spoke about this in last week's daf, right? The idea that when a craftsman changes an object, he acquires the object, and effectively upon completion of that object, what does he do? He sells it back to the person who wants the object. So look at Rashi. No selling the me'isav. They kanenu b'shinui, because according to Rabbi Meir, the craftsman Reuven has acquired we'll call it the chair, right, or the bench. He acquired the bench ultimately again through a shinui, through making a change. Aval Nasan eitzim deloshina velokani ala tachton. So we'll say, so now this is incredible. This is really incredible. So according to Rabbi Meir, so what Reuven, the craftsman, is obligated to pay me is the value of the wood. the value of the wood. So we'll say, which is interesting, because it could be in Rabbi Meir's model, what happens? Ruvain could actually come out ahead, right? How does he come out ahead? Because he owes me the value of the wood, but he has an asset, right? He now has the bench. So assuming that the bench itself is more, now again, we're not encouraging people to do this, obviously it's wrong, but Lamaise, it is quite interesting. So that's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Huda says, it depends. Ima shevach yesra ali yitzia, no sin las yitzia. So we'll say, Rabbi Huda says like this, look, in these kind of situations, we have two amounts, right? What are the amounts? Either number one, the appreciation, right? The value of the finished product, right? The appreciation, or ultimately, again, the expenses. The expenses. So if the appreciation of the object is more than the expenses, no sin lo yitzia. So we'll say, so essentially, Rabbi Yehuda says, I am obligated to pay the lesser of the two values, either again the appreciation of the object or the expenses. But if the expenses are more, then literally again the appreciation, no sin lo es hashevach. So we'll say this is the fundamental machlokes, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Huda. Umod Rabbi Meir, but listen to this. Rabbi Meir will agree in the following case. Rabbi Meir will agree. Im nasan eitzim l'chara shalasos mem kisei noah. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Meir does agree in the following case. Let's say I hired Ruben to make me a nice chair. I don't know, like a throne. Right? Where am I going to use my throne? For sure, not in my own house, but perhaps, right? Perhaps when I go over to someone else's house, right? I could bring it with me, use it there. Right? So I hired him to make me a nice chair. And what happens? He makes me a mediocre chair, a folding chair, right? Or I go ahead and hire him to go ahead and make me a nice bench. Makes a mediocre bench. So I'll say, so now what's interesting about this case? What's interesting about this case is I hired him to make an object. He made the object. So what went wrong over here? What went wrong? We've got a quality assurance issue, right? So in other words, that's what, in other words, I hired him for a certain standard. He came in below that standard. So what's the halacha? In that case, even Rabbi Meir agrees, no sin We'll say in this case, even Rabbi Meir will agree with Rabbi Huda that what? That halacha l'maisa you pay the lesser of the expenses or the appreciation. I will say now, what's the logic in that? What's the logic in that? Rabbi Meir only says in general that I have to pay the value of the wood, that ultimately again, that you have to pay the value of the wood when there was a fundamental change, a shinoi, right? So I contracted Ruvain to go ahead and make me a chair, and he made me a bench. So that's when we say ultimately again there's a shinoi. Ruvain went ahead and acquired the object essentially, and therefore he's obligated to pay me back for the raw materials that I gave him. But in a case where I contracted him to make a chair, and he made a chair, I'm just not happy with the quality of the chair. So I will say, so in that case, he can't really, in that kind of case, he doesn't acquire it with the shinui, because at the end of the day, he really did what I asked him to do, just not to the standard. In that case, even Rabbi Meir will agree with Rabbi Huda that you pay the lesser of either, again, expenses or appreciation. Incredible. So we'll say, so incredible machlokes. So we'll say now, what I will just tell you something interesting is as follows, that because we're going to get into a little bit of a different sugya in just a moment. So the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Schirus, Parak Yud, Halacha Dalid, Nasan La'omnin Latakin V'Kilkalu Chayavan L'Shalim. So we'll say, so in general, right, if you give something to a craftsman to work on and the craftsman messes it up, the craftsman is liable. Ketzad, Nasan. So again, the Rambam goes through the different cases. I just want to tell you the principle of the Rambam. The Rambam says, She'ein ha'uman kona b'shevach kli. So we'll say, the Rambam paskins that a craftsman does not acquire the object through changing it. So this is going to be very important. Now again, like I mentioned kind of at the beginning, the application of this is, so just to play this out in a regular case, if I give Ruvain wood and I ask him to make me a bench, the halacha doesn't view it that as soon as he fashions that into a bench, he's effectively acquired the item and is selling it back to me. It's my item. it's my item, and he is a hired worker. So we'll say that could have a number of different ramifications. So just understand, that's how we pass halacha l'maisa. Ein uman kona b'shevach kli. So therefore I will say, just plugging it into this case, so the Rambam, for example, paskins like Rabbi Huda. So therefore halacha l'maisa, if I go ahead and I give to Reuven, I say, Reuven, here's wood, make me a chair. And Reuven goes ahead and makes me a bench. So we'll say, am I obligated to pay for a bench? Now, by the way, if the craftsman is good, it's like, it is a chair, right? It's just a double wide chair, right? It's not really a bench. Right? So it identifies as a chair. So we'll say, so l'maisa, here's what's important. So now I go ahead and I hire Reuven to go ahead and make for me a chair. He makes me a bench. So one thing is clear, I'm not obligated to pay for a bench. So we'll say, so now, because we don't hold uman kona b'shevach kli, so ultimately again, so what is the liability over here? So that's why passing like Rabbi Yehuda, that we look at the lesser of the two, either appreciation or ultimately again expenses. And whatever the lesser of those two is, that's ultimately again what Reuven is going to have to pay me back. Okay, incredible. So we'll say, so like I said, but that's the principle to remember. Ein uman kona b'shevach kli. A craftsman does not acquire the object he's working on by changing it. Okay, let's go at this. We'll say, so now we come to a really interesting discussion. Ibay lehu. Yesh shevach samanim ala tzemer o ein shevach samanim ala tzemer. We'll say, listen to this. When you dye wool, is that considered to be a material improvement or not? Now, look at Rashi for just a moment. Last wide line of Rashi, Yesh Shevach, this is actually really fascinating. Yesh Shevach, Kilomar, Chazusa milsihi, Olav milsa. See, I will say, here's what's interesting. When you dye an object, when you dye wool, what have you changed in the wool? What have you changed? Right? Qualitatively, what have you changed in the wool? Nothing. Right? In other words, whatever functionality the wool had before, the wool b'pashto still has now. What have you changed? What have you changed? What have you changed? The appearance. So we'll say, someone's asking an interesting question over here. Do we say that ultimately, again, the change of appearance is something halachically significant or not? And I will say now, at first glance, the Gemara says, hey, Ridami. So you got to give me a little bit more context. And I'll say, by the way, I'll just also mention to you, I think that this question has profound hashkafic significance as well. So I will say, a lot of times in the world of change, there are different types of changes that we make. There are internal changes that no one knows about, right? I know about it, Kadosh Baruch Hu knows about it, and these are the type of change I'm working on correcting something from within. And I'll say, but sometimes in life, I make external changes. And those external changes can manifest themselves in a variety of ways. Those external changes may be in the way that I dress. Those external changes might be in the places that I go or I don't go. Those are external changes. It's interesting that just in the world of change dynamic, do external changes help? Or at the end of the day, is it all about internal changes? And if external changes occur, but they're not accompanied by internal changes, is that type of change really meaningful? And does it have staying power? So just again, we will circle back on the hashkafa. I will say, but it's always interesting to see that the way the world works is halacha and hashkafa always go hand in hand. So whatever becomes like a technical legal issue is very often the same issue on the neshama dika level as well. So we'll focus right now on the legal issue. We'll loop back to the hashkafic issue. So do we say that ultimately changing the appearance of something has a halachic or legal significance? So we'll say, the Gemara says, hey Dami, what's your case? What are we talking about over here? Ilema de gazel samanim, vidakinhu, vitarinu, vitsava bahen. So we'll say, we're talking about the following case, that I went over to Reuven, I stole Reuven's herbs. I stole his herbs. You know, in today's day and age, that means something totally different, right? Right, but I will say, but today I went ahead and I stole his herbs for his dyes, right? So what happens? I stole his stuff, and then what I was supposed to say, I cooked it. In other words, obviously I made it into dyes. So if we're talking about a case where I stole his plant materials, and I made it into dyes, and then I used it to dye something. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, so therefore in that case, I should be liable. Why? We'll say not as much for the act of dyeing, but much more for the act of theft. Like I've taken something from him. And we'll say, remember again, the Gemara is operating with the principle that maybe we hold uman kona b'shevach kli, that when you steal something and you change exchange it, you acquire it. So if that's the case, I should be on the hook ultimately again just for the value of the dyes themselves. No, that's not the case. The gazel samamanim shruyin b'tzava. Now what's the case? I stole already made dye. Already made dye. That was already made. I stole it and I dyed something with it. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Yesh shevach samanim agabei tzemer. So we'll say, so now watch this. Do we say, so now the case over here is I stole dye, already made dye, and I dyed wool. So we'll say, so now watch this. So now we'll say, now whose wool did I dye? Whose wool did I dye? I dyed my wool. So I stole Ruvain's dye, and I dyed my wool. So now what's the halacha? What's the halacha? The Gemara says, so yesh shevach samanim agabei tzemer. Ultimately, again, so do we say, so does Reuven have the ability to say, right, go ahead, do we say that there is material improvement on dyed wool? Yesh shevach samanim agabei tzemer, darmaluhu, havli samanoi, teshak l'sinu. And therefore, Reuven has the right to say, give me back, ultimately again, give me back my dye. O Dilma, ein shevach samanim agabei tzemer, or do we say, no, dyeing wool it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't materially improve the wool. Damarle, les lech gabai velo midi. Where I both say, ultimately, again, I can say to Reuven, I don't have anything of yours. I don't have anything of yours. I will say, now, we're going to see, we're going to finish this case, but that's the shaila. I stole the dye, I dyed my wool. So I will say, so now, again, what's the status of that dye once it's in the wool? Does dyed wool have a significance in halacha? Right? Chazusa milsa, changing the appearance is halachically significant, and therefore the dye still exists, and therefore halacha l'maisa, again, Reuven has a right to go ahead and sumif to get back the dye, or maybe not. Maybe once the dye is applied to the wool, essentially, it's as if I don't have the dye anymore, because dyed wool, undyed wool doesn't really make a difference, and therefore I claim to Reuven, I'm so sorry, I don't have your dye anymore. Now again, I'd still be liable for theft, but lamaisa, the dye on the wool is no longer halachically significant. Okay, so Amri, so let's analyze this a bit more. I don't understand, what does this mean? So we'll say, let's say we go with the idea that dyed wool is not meaningful. Right? That we'll say now, again, what we're asking over here is, dyed wool doesn't in any way enhance the functionality of the wool. Whatever the wool could be used for before dyeing could be used for after dyeing. So again, we're struggling with over here, does dyeing have a significance? So Rabbi says, so now, watch this. Let's go back to what we just said. So you're telling me now, if dyeing has a significance, then ultimately, again, I'm liable to Reuven. But if dyeing doesn't have a significance, I'm not liable to Reuven. What does that mean? Let's say, for argument's sake, you're right. Let's say dyeing the wool halachically is considered to be as if it doesn't occur, insignificant. Do I ever have the right to say to Reuven, I don't have anything of yours? What do you mean I don't have anything of yours? We'll say, who cares if dyeing is significant or not, right, on the wall? At the end of the day, if I stole dye from Reuven, what am I obligated to do? What am I obligated to do? Pay back dye. Pay back dye. So I don't understand what the discussion is over here. Ella, watch this. Ella hach gisa ein sheva samana magabit semer ubay shlumile. Oh, Dilma, yesh sevach samana magabit semer. So we'll say, now watch this. So rather, here's the shaila. If you hold like this, if you hold ein shevach samana magabit semer, that when you dye wool, from a halachic perspective, we'll say that has not done anything. Right, that has not halachically accomplished anything or fundamentally changed anything. So therefore, Rabbi say, if that's the case, then what's the halacha? If I go ahead and I steal dye from Reuven, and I use it to dye my wool, what's my liability? What's my liability? To pay him back for the dyes. That's it. Oh, Dilma, the other possibility is, yesh shevach samana magabit semer. No, when you dye wool, Rabbi say, the new appearance is halachically significant. V'amrlei hamanchi kamach shaklinu. So we'll say, and I can say to Reuven, okay, Reuven, you're right. I stole your dye. Here it is. If you want it, take it. In other words, the dye, the stolen object is extant. It's right there in the wool. If you want it, take it. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Shaklinu, but my shakli. How is Reuven supposed to take his dye back from the wool? Bitzafun, detergent. he could wash the wool and extract the dye. The Gemara said, Safon, Ibrima Avar Hashavala Avid. Detergent is going to destroy the dye. It's not going to go ahead and recollect the dye. Ella, hachama askinon. I say, now finally we come to. So what's the case we're dealing with over here? Listen to this. The Gemara says, "Kigom the gazal tzemer v'samon dechad." So here it is. Here is the case. I stole wool and dye belonging to Ruvain. Okay, now this comes together a bit better. I steal wool and dye belonging to Ruvain, and what happens? V'tzavei lahu tzemer b'hanach samamanim v'hadar v'kama hadalei nihilei. So both say, so now watch this. So now here's the case. I steal wool and dye from Ruvain, and I dye the wool. And then both say, now what do I do? Now what do I do? And now I want to be about tshuva. So what do? I give the dyed wool back to Ruvain. I give the whole thing back to Ruvain. So we'll say, now what's the shaila? Is this considered to be a proper act of hashava? Is this considered to be a proper act of returning of stolen property? Now watch this. So what's the shaila? Yesh shavach samanim agabei tzemer v'kama hadalei samanim v'tzemer. So I both say, so do we say that the act of dyeing wool, changing the appearance, is a halachically significant act, a meaningful act, and therefore again, because it's meaningful, this is a proper return of stolen property, right? I've returned both the wool as well as the dye. Oh, Dilmar, maybe the other possibility is, Ein shevach samonim al gabei tzemer. No. Halacha does not view dyed wool as any more significant than undyed wool. And therefore again, v'tzemer mahadurlahu, samanim lo mahadurlei. And therefore we'll say, what we would say is, in this act of returning it, we count it as if I have returned the wool, but ultimately again, not the dye. Even though again the wool is dyed, in this approach, I will say, this is the other side of the coin, that dyed wool is not really significant. And from a halachic perspective, dyed wool doesn't have any more chashivos than undyed wool. If that's the case, when I return now the dyed wool, right? Remember, I stole the wool, I stole the dye, I dyed the wool, now I'm returning everything together to Ruvain. That's counted as an act of returning the wool, but not an act of returning the dyes. Very interesting. Amri, so we'll say that's our shaila. So the Gemara says, Amri, teipok lei. So we'll say second wide line. Amri teipok lei dayakar lenehile bidami. So we'll say, so I don't understand, but the answer here should be clear, which is what? Remember, we'll say, bipashtos, dyed wool is worth more than undyed wool. So at the end of the day, I am returning something that has greater value, to which the Gemara says, no, we're dealing with a situation now where what? Actually, undyed wool is actually worth less than dyed wool, whatever the mitzias is. So therefore that doesn't work. The other possibility is, kigon, shetzava bahen kupa. Or the other possibility is that we don't have to frame this as a case of wool. We could also frame it as a case of what? Of where I stole a barrel, and I stole a basket, and I stole dye from Reuven. And what did I do? I dyed the basket. And I will say everybody agrees that what? That a dyed basket has no greater value than an undyed basket. So that would be a case, we'll say, where again the value doesn't change. But the shaila is ultimately again is returning the object with the dye. So we'll say, you hear what it's so fascinating. So in other words, I'm stealing from Ruvain dye and an object, and then I dye the object. So the shaila is, when I return the dyed object, does that satisfy my responsibility for returning all of the stolen property? Or do we say, no, you return the object, that works fine, but you have not properly returned the dye? And I both say, what does that depend on? What that depends on is, does the halacha recognize that a dyed object is more meaningful and significant than an undyed object? If you say yes, that ultimately again it's more meaningful and significant, then the hashava and then the return ultimately again is a proper one. If you hold it is not, then ultimately again you return the object but not the dye. So fascinating. So the Gemara goes right. Ravina says, what's the case over here? Askinon kigon ditzemer dechad v'samanim dechad. I said, this is interesting. So Ravina says, no. Let's go back. New interpretation of the case. The case is where the dye belongs to one person and the basket belongs to one person, not the same owner as we said before. And what happened? I will say, here's where it gets exciting. V'ka'asi kof v'tzaveh lahu semer b'hanach samanim. So Rabbosai, we knew it was coming. There was a monkey case, always never too far behind. Rabbosai, here it is, right? Monkey comes along and dyes the wall with the dye. Dyes the wall, right? So in other words, Rabbosai, so this is an interesting case over here, right? So now in this situation over here, halacha l'maisa, there's no act of theft, which is interesting, right? No act of theft. So now again, so you have Reuven's got wool, Shimon's got dye, monkey, whatever, whoever he belongs to, wherever he belongs, right? Monkey comes along and dyes the wool. So now I'll say, so what do I do in this case? Now watch this. So the Gemara says, good. Look at Rashi. Kegom December dechav v'samanim dechav v'lav le'inyan gazlan kami b'alei dein kan gezel. Now what's in the chap over here is there's no theft, right? This is not a case of theft. So watch this. The Gemara says. Yesh sheva samanim agavet semer. So we'll say on one hand, do we say that there is value to having something dyed, right? Do we say that at the end of the day when you introduce the dye, so now that is considered to be value added to the wool, and therefore the amarle have these samanai de gabach ninu. So we'll say now watch this. So now here's what I have. I have a piece of dyed wool. So we'll say, so do we say that dye in wool is meaningful and significant, and therefore again, Reuven, who was the owner of Shimon was the owner of the dye, could go over to Reuven, who's the owner of the wool, and say, Reuven, you gotta have to give me back my dye, right? That you have my dye, I see it, it's right there, it's sitting on your wool. So do we say that dyed wool is significant enough that Shimon could come over to Reuven demanding the return of his dye? Or maybe no. Maybe they're both saying the presence of dye on wool is not halachically significant, and therefore again, when Shimon does show up asking for the return of his dye, what does Reuven say? Les lach gabai klum. And Reuven could say, I don't have anything of yours. Right? I don't have anything of yours. Why? Because ultimately, again, dyed wool is not significant, and dyed wool is no more meaningful, ultimately, again, than undyed wool. So I will say, so that's how Ravina frames it. And I will say that just to understand, again, all of this boils. We're just trying to figure out where the tension case comes up. Like, where does this come up? But the core question still remains the same, which is an external cosmetic change halachically recognized or not, or it's not legally recognized, right? Is that considered to be something meaningful and significant or not? In the case of dyed wool, all you are doing is changing appearance, not changing functionality. So halacha l'maisa, is that type of change recognized halachically? How that legal question manifests itself ultimately, again, is the machlokus over here. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So Tashma, let's analyze this a little bit more. So we'll say some of the interesting cases here. Beged shetzavo beklipe arla. So we'll say, what's talacha arla? You're not allowed to consume the fruit for the first 3 years. Can't get benefit from it. So we'll say, so now watch this. Let's say you made dye from arla fruit, right? Or from klipe, it literally means like the shells of arla. So you go ahead and you make dye from the shells of arla, and then what do? You dye your sweater with it. So what's the halacha? Yidlak. You have to destroy the sweater, because you're not allowed to get any benefit ultimately from arla. Now, what kind of benefit are you getting from arla? What kind of benefit, right? What kind of benefit? Dye benefit, right? Appearance benefit, and yet you have to destroy it. What does that tell you? Alma chazusa milsehi. We'll say, what does that tell you? That ultimately, again, a change in appearance has halachic significance, because here you're not changing the functionality of the sweater, right? All you're doing ultimately, again, is changing the actual color. But halacha l'maisa, we still see that it is significant. Chazusa milsehi. Rava says, no. Arla's different. Why is Arla different? So the Gemara says, Amarava, Hanira le'inayim asra Torah. So when it comes to Arla, the Torah prohibited all hana, all benefit, including, we'll call it ocular benefit. Ocular benefits, right? Sight benefit. Disanya, because the pasuk says arelim. So we'll say the pasuk says arelim lo yeachel. So the pasuk ultimately says the fruit is arla, you can't eat it. Ainli ela israchila. I only know that you can't eat arla. How do you know that you can't get benefit from it? You can't use it for dye. You can't use it for light, for illumination. So we'll say there's two phrases in the pasuk. The first part of the pasuk says, "Va'araltem arla so es pirio," which means the fruit in its entirety will be arla. And then the last phrase says, "Arelim lo yachal," you can't eat arla. Now the fact that the Torah goes out of its way to say "Arelim lo yachal," that tells me achila. And therefore, again, "Va'araltem arla so es pirio" comes to include what? All other forms of benefit, even ocular benefit, right? Even vision, sight benefit. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, if you take arla fruit or arla shells and you make dye and you dye your sweater, it is asur. So both say, essentially, the Gemara is saying is you can't bring a proof of arla. Right? Arla is its own thing, its own discussion, and you can't bring a raya from arla. Okay, Tashma, let's bring another case. Begesh etzeval beklipe shvius yidlak. So we'll say this is very interesting. Shmita produce. You also can't, right? You also can't go ahead and utilize Shemitah. You could eat Shemitah produce, but you can't do anything else with Shemitah produce. So let's say you went ahead, you took Shemitah produce or shells of Shemitah fruit, then what did you do? You made a dye. And from the dye, again, you went ahead and dyed your sweater. So what's Talacha Bosai? Yidlak, you have to burn it. You have to burn it. Why? So we'll say, so again, before we said why, what do you see from here? Chazusa milsahi, change of appearance is halachically significant. To which the Gemara says, shiny hasam in this case is different. To Amakra, tihya b'hav yaso tehei. So we'll say this case is different, right? Why is this case different? Because halacha l'maisa, by the pasuk by Shemitah, the lashon is kiyovel kodesh tihya, right? Ulem techa v'chaybers tihya. So we'll say, sorry, kodesh tihya. Torah uses lashon ultimately again of tihya, and halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa tihya teaches me that what? That the produce remains Shemitah sanctity no matter how you change it. So once again, what the Gemara is saying is, right, tihya b'hav yaso tehei. So the Gemara is suggesting is you can't bring a raya from Shemitah either about the halachic significance of appearance, because Shemitah might just be more chamer in general. Okay, Amud Bezer will say, Rava, Rami Tanan. So Rava contrasted ultimately again two different opinions. Okay, fine. Rava contrasted two different opinions. Rami Tanan. So on the one hand it says following. Beged, both say top line, 101, 101b. Beged shetzaval beklipe arla, yidlak. So we'll say if you have a sweater, this is the case we just saw before. If you have a sweater that you go ahead and you dye with arla dye, then what's the halacha? The halacha is you burn it. Alma chazusa milsihi. So we'll say, what do you see from there? You see from there that a change of appearance is in fact halachically significant. That's what you see. Change of appearance is halachically significant. I'll contrast that with the following halacha. Let's listen to this. Revius adam shenivla bebayis. We'll see. It's actually an interesting case. Imagine for a moment you have a revius of blood from a corpse. Now remember again, revius of blood has the ability to go ahead and go ahead and transfer tumah via roof tumas ohel, right? So therefore, we'll say. So now watch this. So now in this case over here, you had a revius of dam that was in the house, but then it got absorbed into the floor of the home. Now once it's absorbed, it no longer goes ahead and transfers any kind of tumah. So watch this. So revius dam sheniv babayis. If you have a revius of blood that was absorbed into the home, into the floor of the home, so then what's the halacha? Habayis tameh. Ultimately, again, the home is tameh. I will say now what that means is now. By the way, Rashi points out over here. Look at Rashi, third line now from the top. Nivla b'karka bayis tameh. Kalim sheba bayis. The bayis la b'kabel tumah the karku. And I will say obviously a home itself cannot be makabel tumah. Right. The only exception to that rule that a home can be makabel tumah is where is by tzaras. Right, by tzaras. But in general, a home cannot contract tumah. The reason for that is because anything that is karka, anything that is land, karka cannot be makabel tumah, and anything that's mechuber the karka, attached to the ground, is considered to be karka itself. So therefore, again, when we say that if there's blood or revius of blood from a corpse in a home, that the home becomes tamei, Rashi just means the kalim in the home. Right? So I have utensils in my house, and then there's a revius of dam from a corpse in the house. The utensils in the home become tamei by dint of tumas ohel. Okay. Now watch this. Habayis tamei. Va'amrila habayis tar. Others say no, the home is tar. V'lo pligi. They're both saying it's not a machlokes. Ha b'kelim d'havu meikara. Ha b'kelim d'asul basof. All right, so both say it's not a contradiction. What does it mean? When we say that ultimately, again, the home is tamei, the kelim are tamei, that means utensils that were there at the time that the blood was still in existence, i.e. before it was absorbed. The one that says that it's not tamei is talking about kelim that came after the blood was absorbed. Look at Rashi. B'kelim, dahavu babayis kodem shenivla sha'isa be'en, ve'hei el abayis laval kelim v'nitmud l'basof la'achar shenivla. So we'll say very simple. So it's not a contradiction. If you have kelim that were in the house at the time that the blood was there before it got absorbed, those kelim will become tamei. But if ultimately again the blood becomes absorbed, then kelim are brought in. Those kelim will not be tamei. Okay, now watch this. All of this is fascinating and riveting, but nothing to do with our topic. Here's what has to do with our topic. Nivla biksus. I will say, what happens if you have revius dam that got absorbed into a garment? So I have a sweater, and it has a revius dam of a corpse. Ultimately, again, that got absorbed. Then what's the Chabad say? By the way, you could see like this in the days of Tum and Tara. You're going to see this, where this is going to come up. A doctor, right? The doctor is operating on a patient, right? Ultimately, again, the patient passes away, but the doctor still gets blood. So again, you could mamish have a messias like this. But again, we don't have to get into that. The case over here is, now what happens? The garment, you have a garment that absorbed a revius of dam. So what says, now what's the shaila? What's the status of the garment? So nivla biksos, what happens if you have a revius of dam from a corpse that got absorbed into a garment? Roin imiskabesas haksus fiotim and revius dam tmeya. So we'll say, watch this. So we look at this. If you were to launder this garment, and you would be able to extract the revius of dam, then ultimately again, the garment is tamei. The garment is tamei. Ve'im lav, but if you would launder it and you would not be able to extract the revius of dam, then what? Then ultimately again, tahora. So I'll say, so take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, miskabesas haksus yotze hemen revius dam, shevetchila nivla bo yosem revius, vehechnes haksus lebayis tmeh. So we'll say, so now, okay, so watch this. So the case over here, is actually very interesting. The way Rashi sets this up is like this. You have a garment that went ahead and absorbed more than a revius, right? Because they're both say you have to set it up that way. Because whenever you're trying to extract something that was absorbed into something else, you can never extract the same amount that was originally absorbed. So the case over here is, watch this, it's fascinating. You have a garment that absorbed more than a revius of dam. So what says, now the shaila is, you take that garment, you bring it into a house. You bring it into a house. So now the shaila is, does that garment convey tumas ohel to everything else that's under the same roof as the garment? So the Gemara says, it depends. What does it depend? It depends if halacha l'maisa, can you extract a revius of dam from that sweater or not? If you can extract the revius of dam, then ultimately, again, that sweater or the dam in that sweater will convey tumas ohel to everything, or will convey tuma through tumas ohel to everything else in the house. And if not, ve'im laftar, look at Rashi, ve'im laftar, habayis, shloel aravias, shekvar chaser b'havla b'ksus. Aval say, because again, if you can't extract the revius of dam, then I'll say, what does that mean? That means that we view that sweater as not having a revius adam. So we'll say, now watch what's happening over here. This is actually a really fascinating case. So right, remember again, let's start with case one. What was case one again? Case one, there's no way I'm not going to finish this daf, right? We're going to get to this, right? So let's say, so now what was case one? Case one was, there is a revius of dam in the home. So what's talach over there? That dam conveys tumas all to everything else under the roof. So if there are kalim there, right, everything else becomes tamei. Fine. Case two, I have a garment outside of the house. The garment absorbs a revius, more than a revius and a half, we'll call it, of blood. I now bring that garment into the house. What's my shaila? Does that, so now there's a sweater with a revius of dam, does that revius absorbed in the sweater go ahead and convey tumah, because everything's under the same roof, to all of the kalim in the house? So the Gemara essentially says, it depends. What does it depend on? Can you extract a revius of dam from that sweater? If you can, then ultimately again the dam in the sweater conveys tumas ohel. If you can't, then it does not convey tumas on. Now, what's the logic? Because essentially what we're saying is like this: if it can, then we view that blood in the sweater as a revius of blood. By the way, you don't even have to actually extract the blood. As long as you could extract a revius of blood from that sweater, ultimately, again, it's as if there's a revius of blood sitting in that house, and that's it. If you can't extract a revius of blood from that sweater, then I will say halachically, it's as if what? There's not a revius of dam. If there's not a revius, I will say, now here's what's interesting. It's as if there's not a revius of dam, and therefore there's no tumah. Now what's fascinating about that? It's as if there's not a revius of dam, even though what? Right? There is a revius of dam absorbed in that sweater. But essentially halacha says, if you can't extract that revius of dam, then it's not a revius of dam. I will say, by the way, what a profound Musar Haskell. And I will say, if you have potential buried inside of you, but you don't extract it, it's meaningless. Unactualized potential means nothing. It's very nice. You have koach, you have ability, you have potential. If you don't do something with it, then halachically and hashkafically, it's as if it doesn't exist. You have a revius of dam. There is a revius of dam in that sweater. If you can't get it out, halacha l'maisa doesn't exist. The dam doesn't exist. The potential doesn't exist unless you're willing to actually wring it out. Incredible. So I will say, so now watch this. Nimlav Torah. Good. So the Gemara says, I'm Rav Kana. Now I will say, now, by the way, I just want to point out, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China, right? By the way, I'll tell you just a great mess. I don't know if I've ever told you this very quickly. I remember years and years ago, I was in Eretz Yisrael, and I was in the lobby somewhere, and they had, you remember the show Kojak? Kojak, they had Kojak on, right? Kojak on. So I will say, it was Kojak with Hebrew subtitles, right? So Kojak said, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? I remember this, he said it. What was the subtitle? Ma inyan shmita etzel har Sinai. That was the Hebrew subtitle. Ma inyan shmita etzel har Sinai. Right? What the laws of shmita have? There's Rashi, right? Ma inyan shmita etzel har Sinai. Incredible. See, I will say the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. Ultimately, again, is that even the most mundane thing has the ability to be kaddish. Incredible. In any event, someone says Zimlav Torah. So we'll say, now, by the way, why is this here? What does that have to do with anything? Because we'll say at the end of the day, remember, when you bring the sweater into the house, we'll say, what does the sweater have? It has the appearance of blood. Right? It has the appearance, right? And what do you see from here? That chazusa appearance is halachically significant. That's why this whole thing is brought over here, right? Because lamaisa, again, we don't view sweater absorbed in a blood as just the sweater. The fact that the blood is there, that I could see the blood, ultimately is meaningful and significant. So from here you see that ultimately, again, appearance is in fact meaningful and significant. So we'll say, so by the way, take a look at Rashi. Actually, it's the last line of Rashi. Alma chazusa. I'm sorry. I said that incorrectly. Just the opposite. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Habayis shlohil aravius shekvar chazer bahavlo biksus avalaksus tamei. I'm sorry, I missed this part. Shetchilas negia beravius mitzum sam nitma. Now, now remember again. Let's play this out. So now we just said, if the sweater, right? You bring the sweater into the home. If you can't get a revius of dam out of the sweater, then what? Then ultimately, again, that sweater with the absorbed blood will not convey tumah to the kalim inside of the house. However, watch this. Now, what's the chab? When you bring that sweater into the home, while it's true that you might not be able in second case to extract a revius of dam, but I will say, what can you do? You could see a revius of dam on that sweater. I was about to say, it's clear when I look at it that there is a revius of dam absorbed in that sweater. Yet I will say, what do you see from here? We don't really care what it looks like. What do we care about? our ability to extract. The fact that we don't care, so when I'm looking at it, it's clear to me that there is a revius of dam absorbed in there, yet we don't care what it looks like. So what do you see from that? You see from there that halacha l'maisa, appearances are halachically insignificant. Alma chazusa lav milsihi. So Rabbi says, so this seems to be raya. Amrav Kana, no, this is not a good case. I'll tell you why. Mikule revio shanukan pedam tevusa drabanon. This is a different case, Rabbi say. This is actually fascinating. This is actually a case of a rabbinic chumrah. What's the chumrah? We'll say this is the case of dam tevusa. What is dam tevusa? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, dam tevusa, harug sheyatze men revius dam b'chayov u'b'moso. Safek kula b'chayev v'safek kula b'moso. So we'll say dam tevusa. We know that when we speak about the ability of blood to convey tumah, so we'll say that's only what kind of blood? Only blood that comes from a corpse. Blood that comes from a living person doesn't convey tumah. We'll say dam tevusa is blood that came out of a person that was dying. And there's a suffix. Did it ultimately again come from a person who was alive, or did it come from a person who was dead? So therefore, Rabbi say, go back to the previous Rashi. Rashi says, Mikule revios, shaldam kalkagon dam tevusa she'ena matami bo'al amidrabanas. We'll say, midaraisa, dam tevusa. Suffix dam does not convey tumas ohel. Midrabanan, it does. So Rabbi said this, essentially what the Gemara says is you can't bring a raya from this, because at the end of the day this whole discussion is a din d'Rabbanan. So therefore again, because it's a din d'Rabbanan, therefore it doesn't bring any raya. So Rabbi say, we're still in the midst of the same exact machlokes. Still same machlokes, which is chazus amilsahi, chazuz. No, the beauty of Gemara, I think what makes Daf Yomi so exciting is that the tangents that you go on, right? It's like you think you're on a particular journey, and then you see something beautiful over here, something beautiful over here, and you take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that. Now granted, you've gotten absolutely no further in your original question, right? We're still at the same point, but over the course of the journey, you pick up so many beautiful spiritual and halachic nuggets. It's incredible. So therefore I will say, we are no further along than we were, 45 minutes ago, which is the same question is still here, which is chazusa milsi or lav milsi. Does halacha view a change of appearance as something halachically meaningful or significant or not? That question is still outstanding. So we're not finished. Let's go a little bit weiter. A couple more minutes. Let's go. Says Rava Rami. So Rava say Rava contrasts that again. Still same topic. Rava contrasts the following. Tanan. Miminat sovin, sviche, satis v'kotza, yeshlan shvius v'ledmein shvius. So we'll say, now listen to this. So if you have, we'll say back to the Shemitah cases, it's about the Shinti cases. So we'll say, svichin is an interesting discussion in Shemitah. Svichin are things that grow on their own. Right? I didn't plant it, it grew on its own. So let's say you have svichin, right, so of satis v'kotza. So we'll say these are literally translated as sapphire and woad, W-A-O-D, right? O-A-D. So we'll say, so again, different kinds of plants. So you have svichon of these types of plants. Yeshlan shvius, so they are subject to the laws of Shemitah. Uledemein shvius. And I will say, ultimately, again, if you sell them, I will say, remember again, if you sell Shemitah produce, the Shemitah sanctity transfers on to the money, right, onto the proceeds. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, the svichon of these plants ultimately, again, has Shemitah sanctity, and if you sell it, the money has Shemitah sanctity. Yeshlan beer, they're subject to laws of beer. They're say, what's halacha beer? Beer sounds like this. Remember, produce during the Shemitah year is hefker. As hefker, what can you do? You can go into the field and gather it. It's your own field. So you are allowed to store Shemitah produce in your house as long as what? It's readily available in the fields. The moment it's no longer readily available in the fields, then halacha l'maisa, you are not allowed to store it in your house. Okay, so we'll say, so right, yeshlan beer, good. Alma, so we'll say, what do you see from here? Alma, eitzim yesham mishum kedusha shvius. Now we'll say, now this is a little bit of a tangent over here. So we'll say, so Rava says, what do you see from here? That wood, eitzim, has Shemitah sanctity. So we'll say this is a tangent in our tangent. Shemitah, right? Wood has Shemitah sanctity. Or many of the Gemara is the kasha. Ale kanim va'ale gifanim shegivavan bechava apnei asada. So also listen to this. If you have ale kanim va'ale gifanim, so also you have different branches. right? Reeds, you have reed branches, or you have branches from the vine. Shegivavan bechava. What did you do? Both say you went ahead and you made them a pile into the field. If you went ahead and you picked them, right? If you picked them ultimately for consumption purposes, they have Shemitah sanctity. If you picked it for wood, however, ultimately again it doesn't have kedusha shvius. So we'll say contradiction. We just said before that wood does have Shemitah sanctity. Here we're saying that wood doesn't have Shemitah sanctity. What's going on? Umeshani, and we answered it. Amar Kra, the pasuk says li'achla. Both say ultimately again this is actually fascinating. The pasuk says, "V'haisa Shabbos ars lachem li'achla." Ultimately, the Shemitah produce will be there for you for consumption. Shabbos say, what does that tell you? What's subject ultimately again? What type of item is subject to Shemitah sanctity? B'mi shahana asal ubiuro shavin. So I will say this applies to something where ultimately again the benefit and destruction occur at the same time. As I will say, in general, what type of item has Shemitah sanctity? Where benefit and consumption occur simultaneously. And I will say, what's the paradigmatic example of benefit and consumption occurring simultaneously? Eating, right? I take Shemitah produce, I take an apple, and I eat it. So that the benefit and destruction are occurring simultaneously. Watch this. Yatsu eitzim shahana asan achar bi'uran. So Rabbi said this comes to exclude wood. Rabbi said it's actually quite fascinating. When you use wood for burning, so I think city dwellers, right? City folks. So we assume, so when are you getting benefits from the fire? When the wood's burning. In fact, that's not the way it works. The way it actually works is really the benefit from fire comes from coals, right? After the wood has burned a little bit, right, and kind of made into a coal. That's when there's benefit. So wood is actually interesting. So therefore, normally wood is not subject to wood does not have Shemitah sanctity. Why? Because consumption and benefit don't occur at the same time, right? Benefit occurs later on when it becomes a coal, yet consumption or destruction occurs immediately when it's kindled. So I will say, so therefore, interestingly enough, so in a general sense, wood will not be subject to Shemitah sanctity. I says iga eitzim demashchan dana asan ubi uran shava. But I will say there is this case. Actually, this is very interesting. Eitzim demashchan. Eitzim demashchan is this type of wood, oil wood. So we'll say, what's the chap of oil wood? So apparently, it's wood that's very oily. So what would people often use it for? They would use it as a torch because you'd be able to ignite it, and it ignited immediately, and therefore, so we'll say, so that's a case of where what? Destruction and benefit and consumption are occurring simultaneously. Rabbi said, fine, you can find a specific case like that, but top of Kuf Beis, Stam Eitzim La Sakahin Omdin. So Rabbi said, that's not the normal case, right? That's not the normal case. Normal case is that wood is not used for a torch. Normal case is that wood ultimately again is used for burning. And because that's a Stam wood case, ultimately again, wood is not normally going to be subject to Shemitah sanctity because there is a distinction ultimately again between, or I should say, consumption and benefit do not occur simultaneously. So I will say, we're going to stop over here for today. So I know we just kind of ran into Shemitah. I'll say, Miras Hashem, tomorrow we're going to close out the Chazusa case. I just want to do it after the Shemitah case. So we'll do the Rambam ultimately again on, does a change of appearance, is that halachically significant or not? We'll also see the halacha l'mayis of Shemitah sanctity by wood. All tomorrow we'll say, wow, what a start to the week. Shkayach, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Good morning.
Back at the beginning of this year, what the original owner of the